There are some shows you finish, move on from, and never think about again. And then there are shows that just stay with you. Dead Like Me is one of those shows. I first watched it years ago, expecting something quirky. A dark comedy about a teenage girl who gets hit by a toilet seat re entering Earth's atmosphere, and she dies. Then she becomes a Grim Reaper, and in theory, it is that. But it is also so much more than that. It's quiet, it's deeply human, and it kind of sneaks up on you. What surprised me the most wasn't the premise or the humour, it was how casually the show treats death. Not as something epic or meaningful, but as something random, inconvenient, and deeply unfair. And somehow, instead of making death feel colder, Dead Like Me makes it feel more human. This video isn't just a retrospective or a recap, it's about how Dead Like Me changed the way I think about death. And why, even though it only lasted 2 seasons and it never got the ending it deserved, it still matters. Let's talk about what Dead Like Me was trying to say and why it stuck with me for so long. Dead Like Me premiered on Showtime in 2003. It was created by Brian Fuller, the mind behind Pushing Daisies, Wonderfalls, and later on Hannibal. On paper, the show does sound kind of ridiculous. George is 18, unsure where she fits in the world, and then she dies and is recruited by a group of Grim Reapers who escort souls from the living just before they die. And Dead Like Me, it doesn't dress death up. There's no grand explanation for why the Reapers exist. There's no heavenly hierarchy except for with angels.
Oh, man. Angels don't like getting their hands dirty. Upper management type.
There's no promise of cosmic justice. There's just post-it notes with a name and an estimated time of death. It's a job. It's framed like an unpaid public service. It's routine, repetitive, and it's often emotionally draining. And the show's tone kind of reflects that. It's muted, it's grey, and it's often a little bit uncomfortable. The jokes land kind of quietly, and to be honest, tragedy does just happen without warning. And George, instead of becoming enlightened by death, she starts the series angrier and more lost than she kind of ever was alive. And that's what made Dead Like Me feel so different at the time. It wasn't asking what happens after we die, it was asking how people cope when meaning doesn't just magically appear in front of you. And from the very first episode, the show makes one thing clear. Death does not give you answers, it just forces you to sit with those questions. Strangest and most quietly radical things that Dead Like Me does is turn death into paperwork. Reaping isn't framed as something mystical or heroic. There are no robes or scythes except for in the intro. And there are no dramatic speeches about destiny. Instead, it's a job, and a deeply unglamorous one at that. The Reapers have schedules, they have rules that they don't fully understand, and they answer to someone who answers to someone. And just like any workplace, there's an unspoken understanding. You don't ask too many questions because you probably won't like the answers. What makes this so effective is how familiar this feels. Death isn't presented as some grand cosmic event, it's treated with the same dull inevitability as office work, customer service, or any system that keeps running regardless of who it hurts. There's something almost cruel about it. George dies and very little changes. Death doesn't give her a clean break from the grind, it just gives her the same routine in a different font. People die because their name is on the list, not because of the lesson they've learned or because the universe needs balance. Sometimes they're kind, sometimes they're cruel, sometimes they're children. The Reapers aren't there to judge or intervene, they're only there to make sure the process continues. That randomness is unsettling, but it's also honest. Most stories about death are obsessed with meaning. They reassure us that everything happens for a reason, that suffering is purposeful, that loss is meant to lead us somewhere. Dead Like Me refuses to offer that comfort. Instead, it suggests something colder, but strangely freeing. Death doesn't care. And because it doesn't care, meaning isn't something that we're given, it's something that we have to make ourselves. You can see this philosophy reflected in the way that reaping actually works. The soul is removed before the death occurs. The body dies anyway, and that moment is often quiet, awkward, and confusing. There's no dramatic goodbye, there's no swelling music or
Sense of closure, life just stops, and for George, this is devastating. She doesn't gain clarity after death, she loses it, if anything. The future she assumed she'd have is gone, and in its place is a job that she did not apply for and rules that nobody explains. And that is the core cruelty of the system. Not that people die, but that we're expected to accept it without explanation. And in that way, Dead Like Me isn't really about the afterlife at all. It's about how people respond when they realise the universe isn't keeping score. When there's no guarantee that things will make sense in the end, the bureaucracy of death becomes a metaphor for adulthood, for grief, disillusionment. You're handed responsibilities you didn't ask for, you follow rules that feel arbitrary, and you keep going. Not because you understand the system, but because the stopping doesn't change it. And maybe that's why this portrayal of death stuck with me. It didn't try and make loss beautiful, it didn't offer easy comfort, it just acknowledged how unfair, confusing, and mundane it can be. And it trusted the audience to sit with that discomfort. Dead Like Me doesn't tell us how to feel about death. It doesn't explain death. It shows us how people keep going when those explanations never come. What makes Dead Like Me's philosophy of death work isn't just the system, it's the people trying to live inside it. Every major character represents a different way of coping with death, grief, and the absence of meaning. Not solutions, just ways of surviving. Some are loud, some are quiet, and some are quietly destructive. George is our entry point into this. She begins the series angry, bitter, and emotionally frozen. Death doesn't give her clarity, it takes away the future she assumed she'd have. George's way of coping is resistance. She refuses to emotionally participate in the system because accepting it would mean admitting that her life ended abruptly, pointlessly, without resolution. Her anger isn't immaturity, it's grief with nowhere to go. Rube, by contrast, has gone in the opposite direction. He lives his life by surrendering completely to routine. He follows the rules, he enforces the structure, and he avoids questioning the system wherever possible. His calm isn't peace, it's containment, really. Rube's way of coping is resignation. If the system exists, then maybe it has to make sense, and believing that is easier than confronting what death took from him. Betty is something else entirely, and Rube describes her as a force of nature, and that does feel right. Betty's a jumper, and not in a quiet or despairing way. She's restless, energetic, impossible to pin down. You can't hold her still, and there's no bag for her Polaroid to fit in. Betty loves reaping, she loves people, and she loves a funeral. She died jumping from a cliff that turned out to be a little bit higher than she thought. And when Betty leaves the show, she does it in the same way, by jumping again through someone else's lights. She takes a piggyback ride because for Betty, an open door is an invitation. She's had several identities, different names, different versions of herself. Betty changes things up because staying in one place too long has never really been an option for her. Death didn't still Betty, it just gave her a different way to live. And then we're on to Daisy, Daisy Adair. Daisy's a fucking con artist, and we love her for it. She was a Hollywood actress before she died. She died in a fire on the set of Gone with the Wind in the 30s. Every day is a performance for Daisy. She spins tales about who she knew and who she blew and where she's been. About famous lovers, glamorous faces, married men that she absolutely should not have touched but did anyway. The stories get more and more grandiose with every retelling. And it's not just talk. Before Seattle, Daisy was kicked out of New York for swindling the families of the recently deceased. Ruby even had to pose as a police officer to shut down her first con in Seattle, which feels extremely Daisy in hindsight. Her way of coping is myth-making. Even when the truth is already dramatic, she cannot leave it alone. If she could turn her life into a legend, if she can stay interesting, desirable, unforgettable, then maybe her death didn't feel so small or so unfair. Attention for Daisy is proof that she mattered. She's terrible with rules, she likes horrible men, she is a dreadful flirt, and she genuinely can't understand why George just won't play along. And the thing is, beneath all that noise, Daisy is clearly tortured. Loudness is how she survives, chaos is how she keeps herself from disappearing. And that's why the Mason thing works. It's messy, inappropriate, kind of tender, and it makes sense.
Daisy doesn't cope by accepting death, she copes by refusing to be forgotten. Mason's much more straightforward than that, and more self-destructive. He was born in the late 30s and he died in the 60s, chasing a permanent high. Music, drugs, anything that promised a little bit more feeling. Mason drinks constantly. I'd say he's a consumer. But it's not just addiction, it's searching. He's always looking for something that might finally make him feel okay. His way of coping is numbing. If he dulls himself enough, he doesn't have to sit with the weight of being dead or with the endless repetition of reaping. Mason isn't chasing pleasure. He's running from awareness, from having to feel everything all at once. He's making terrible decisions, smuggling contraband where it absolutely does not belong, stealing money from a robbery he's meant to be reaping. He never has a job. He steals, he squats, he drifts. In another show, Mason would be a cautionary tale, but Dead Like Me doesn't frame him that way. Everyone has a soft spot for him because underneath of it all, Mason's a good guy. He's reckless and irresponsible, yeah. And he's, frequently a nightmare. But he's kind. He's loyal and deeply, quietly lonely. Mason doesn't cope by fixing himself, he copes by staying in motion. Because stopping would mean having to feel everything all at once. And where Mason runs from feeling, Roxy copes through control. She is blunt, aggressive, and frequently cruel. Roxy doesn't numb herself, she doesn't perform, she doesn't myth make, she dominates. Roxy believes in rules, not because they're fair, but because they give her something solid to stand on. She's the enforcer of the group, Rube's backup, the one who makes sure things get done, and the one who uses force when everything else fails. And that isn't random. Roxy died violently, she was murdered, and that trauma never really leaves her. Roxy's anger isn't chaos, it's armor. Control is how she keeps herself safe. If she stays sharp, if she stays intimidating, if she never lets herself soften, then she can't be hurt again. But Dead Like Me never lets that be the whole story. Because underneath the aggression, Roxy is deeply loyal. She shows up, she protects the group, she cares, even when she doesn't know how to show it without turning it into violence. Roxy doesn't cope by understanding death. She copes by refusing to be powerless. Dolores shows us a very different kind of power. Being George's boss at Happy Time, she represents something crucial. Not cruelty in the obvious sense, but the kind that comes wrapped in smiles, forced cheer, and relentless positivity. Dolores Herbig is terminally delightful. And the thing is, she does genuinely care. She remembers birthdays, she throws office parties for people who barely work there. She takes George under her wing almost immediately, even when George gives her every reason not to. Dolores isn't supernatural, isn't cosmic. She's just someone doing her best inside a system that doesn't really care about the people inside it. And that's what makes her unsettling. Not because she's malicious, but because her kindness can't actually protect anyone from the damage the system does anyway. The positivity is real, it's just insufficient. We move on to George's family. They matter because they show us what grief looks like when the dead don't get to explain themselves. Joy, Clancy, and George's younger sister Reggie. Joy's difficult, particular, controlling, and deeply invested in how things are supposed to be. She hates mess, she hates disorder, she hates the word moist, and George has a very specific way of summing her up.
Who had the nerve to name you Joy?
That line isn't just a joke, it's George clocking something true. Joy's coping mechanism is denial. She keeps moving, she keeps organising, she keeps insisting on normal. After George dies, Joy doesn't really slow down, she tightens her grip. If she can keep everything clean, orderly, boxed and moving forward, then maybe she'll have to sit with the fact that her daughter's gone. Joy's positivity isn't comfort, it's avoidance. If she doesn't look directly at the pain, maybe it won't swallow her whole. Clancy goes the other way. He's an English professor, thoughtful, passive, emotionally distant even before George died. He was a good dad in theory, present but also removed. After George's death, he retreats even further. Clancy copes by withdrawing. He makes himself smaller, quieter. He lets the grief sit inside him without ever really touching it.
There's resentment between him and Joy, old tension, unspoken anger, and George's death doesn't ever really heal that. It just exposes it more. And then there's Reggie. Reggie is the quintessential weird kid.
George barely noticed her when she was alive, and then after George dies, she's all that she can think about. Reggie's the only one who doesn't accept the official version of events. She knows George is still around and she
Recognises the signs. She understands the messages that George leaves her in a way that no one else does. Reggie copes by paying attention to things, by asking questions, by refusing to let her sister disappear quietly.
In that way, Reggie becomes George's mirror. Both of them trapped on opposite sides of death, both of them unseen, and both of them desperate to be acknowledged. Together, the last family shows us something Dead Like Me understands deeply.
Death doesn't bring closure, it doesn't resolve relationships, it fractures them. And everyone left behind has to find their own way to live with the silence. And then there's Tiffany. Tiffany's remarkable, precisely because she isn't complicated.
She listens and she offers a quiet presence. She doesn't demand explanations or closure in a show obsessed with broken systems and arbitrary roles. Tiffany represents an alternative.
She represents compassion without agenda. She doesn't fix pain, she just allows it to exist. She's probably the closest in character to Rube. And then even Crystal briefly gestures towards another truth as a Reaper embedded in the living world at Happy Time like George. She exists in the cracks between systems, a reminder that the boundary between life and death in this show is thinner and stranger than it first appears. What Dead Like Me never does tell us is which of these responses is correct. Nobody wins at grief, and no one graduates from loss.
Instead, the show presents coping as survival, imperfect, messy, and deeply human. Over time, George does begin to change, not because death starts to make sense, but because living in constant resistance becomes unbearable.
Growth in Dead Like Me doesn't come from answers, it comes from endurance, from learning how to exist in a world that refuses to explain itself, and choosing somehow to keep going anyway. For all of its emotional honesty, Dead Like Me never quite got the chance to become the show it was trying to be. And that isn't because the idea ran out of steam by any means. It's because the foundation underneath it fractured too early. Brian Fuller, the show's creator, left Dead Like Me very early in its run. And while the show continued without him, something subtle but important shifted. The series had always walked a delicate line, balancing dark humour with genuine grief, absurdity with sincerity. After Fuller's departure, that balance became harder to maintain. Season 2 isn't bad, but it's uneven. Some episodes deepen the show's ideas, others feel more procedural and kind of sitcom adjacent, less willing to sit in the discomfort. The show starts to explain itself more, rules become clearer, arcs become tidier. And while that might sound like progress in terms of most sitcoms, it undercuts one of Dead Like Me's greatest strengths: its refusal to offer clean answers. The show starts to change, not in big, obvious ways, but in small ones. Things get explained, rules get clearer, the world gets a little bit more organised. And that does sound like progress in terms of most sitcoms, but it changes how the show feels. Death stops being something you stumble through and starts being something you've walked through. The discomfort doesn't vanish, it just doesn't linger as long. And that matters because Dead Like Me was never really about the plot. It was about atmosphere and about mood, about sitting in moments that didn't resolve cleanly and don't offer relief. When that tone starts to slip, the emotional weight slipped with it. Moments that once felt heavy start to feel contained, still sad, but just a plot point that's easier to move past. Character growth becomes smaller and quieter, less like a shift, more like a series of adjustments. And then there's the ending, or rather, an absence of one. Dead Like Me was cancelled after 2 seasons, leaving its characters exactly where they were, not finished or resolved, just paused. Years later, a straight-to-DVD movie came out that tried to give the story some closure, but in doing so, it misunderstood what the series and fans needed. The film tries to wrap things up and it explains too much. It resolves arcs that were never really meant to be clean. And in giving the story an ending, it stripped away the ambiguity that made the show meaningful in that first place. What makes this loss sting isn't just that Dead Like Me ended early, it's that it ended mid-thought. You can see the version of the show that might have existed. One that leaned further into its philosophy, one that allowed George's growth to remain messy and incomplete. One that trusted its audience with its uncertainty. Instead, Dead Like Me becomes another example of a series that was too strange, too quiet, and too emotionally honest to survive in the television landscape it was born into. That matters. Not just for this show, but for what it represents. Dead Like Me wasn't cancelled because it failed, it was cancelled because it didn't fit neatly into the expectations. It asked viewers to accept discomfort without reward, and that is a hard sell. The tragedy isn't just that the show ended, it's that it didn't get the time it needed to finish asking its questions. It didn't leave me with answers, it left me with a feeling. A sense that death isn't something we solve or understand, it's something we live alongside, and it's something that interrupts us and frustrates us and refuses to justify itself. What the show taught me more than anything is that meaning doesn't arrive neatly at the end of the story. It isn't handed out as a reward for suffering or patience or doing things the right way. Meaning is something we build while things are still unfinished, while we're still angry and while we're still confused. Dead Like Me never promised closure, and in a strange way, that honesty is what made it comforting to me. It allowed grief to be messy and allowed growth to be slow. It allowed people to keep going without pretending they understood why things happened the way they did. It also gave me this strange comfort. Not answers, just a different way of holding the idea. I don't think Dead Like Me wants us to believe that death actually worked the way it shows us. But I do like the thought that somewhere out there are people, or something like people, doing the work quietly. Not heroes, not judges, just workers, showing up, doing the job most of us can't see, making sure no one crosses that line alone. And I think that idea matters. Not because it explains death, but because it makes the world feel a little less indifferent. The show tells a story about a frog and a toad. In the beginning, God gives Toad a jar. Inside it is death. Toad is told to guard it, not to open it, not to touch it, just to keep it safe, but of course, Frog wants to hold it. He convinces Toad just to let him take it just for a minute. And Frog drops it. The jar shatters and death spills out into the world. And from that moment on, it can't be put back. That story explains the frog that appears throughout the show. A reminder that death wasn't released because someone was cruel or malicious or deserved it. It happened because something fragile was mishandled. Because curiosity won and accidents happen. I like that Dead Like Me frames death that way, not as a punishment or as balance, just as something that entered the world and stayed. Because Dead Like Me never asks us to understand death, it just asks us to imagine that whatever happens next might be handled with a little bit of care. And maybe that's why the show still lingers for so many people. Not because it was perfect, but because it was sincere. It treated death as ordinary, and by doing that, it made life feel fragile, strange, and worth paying attention to. If Dead Like Me meant something to you, you're not alone. And if you've never seen it, it's worth approaching, not as a cult classic or a forgotten oddity, but as a quiet conversation about endings we don't get to choose. This channel's going to keep having conversations like that about shows that wrestle with death, loss, legacy, and forgotten treasures. The things we leave behind and the way they end too soon. It doesn't explain anything, but it does help.